Every year, humans change 10 million hectares of land, and not for the better. Right now, there are more than 2 billion hectares of degraded land around the world. We need to fix this, fast. And technology can help. Restoration is an enormous, complex challenge. It cannot be done by simply planting trees. We need to bring native, complex ecosystems back to life, and it requires deep ecological expertise. Until now, we have been limited to poor facsimiles, like vast plantations of a single kind of tree. But drones change that by allowing us to gather data and plant the right mix of vegetation quickly at enormous scales. And machine learning analysis enables us to plan the planting and then monitor our restoration work. For example, in Australia, we're using drone-based planting and ecology-trained AI to restore thousands of hectares of land mined for coal. Not just planting trees, but bringing back biodiverse, complex ecosystems. On a larger scale, native forests here in Australia have been decimated by catastrophic bushfires and land clearing for agriculture. This means diminished food sources and safe habitats for koalas. A new project would allow us to accelerate the restoration of thousands of hectares of koala forests over the next few years.
We all know that journalists often make things sound worse than they are. But they aren't the only ones. It seems that scientists sometimes do it too. In the past, scientists have claimed the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And that's the area in the Pacific Ocean where plastic waste is collected together to create one kind of big garbage island. Anyway, they have claimed that this area of garbage is twice the size of the state of Texas, or 20 times the size of England. Some scientists even said that there's more plastic in that ocean than plankton adapts to the tiny animals and plants that fish eat. A new report shows that while there is a very serious problem for the environment is not as great as many scientists have said. The research showed that the garbage covers an area that's much smaller than Texas, and wild plastic can harm some sea life. It actually feeds other tiny living creatures. For this reason, the report concludes that we should try to remove the plastic but should focus on stopping more garbage from entering the oceans so it doesn't get worse in the future.
The word hormone is derived from a Greek verb that means to excite. Hormones are found in all multicellular organisms and function to coordinate the parts of the organism. The hormone is a chemical signal. It's produced by one part of the body and is then transported to other parts of the body where it triggers responses in cells and tissues. The concept of chemical messengers in plants first emerged from a series of classic experiments on how plant stems respond to light. Think about this: a houseplant on a windowsill grows toward light. If you rotate the plant, it will soon reorient its growth until its leaves again face the window. The growth of a plant toward light is called phototropism. In a forest or other natural ecosystem where plants may be crowded, phototropism directs growing seedlings toward the sunlight that powers photosynthesis. Some of the earliest experiments on phototropism were conducted in the late 19th century by Charles Darwin and his son Francis. The Darwins observed that a growing seedling could bend toward light only if the tip of the shoot was present. If the tip was removed, the shoot would not curve toward light. The seedling would also fail to grow toward light if the tip was covered with an opaque cap. The Darwins proposed the hypothesis that some signal was transmitted downward from the tip into the part of the stem that controlled growth. Later, experiments by other scientists studying phototropism led to the discovery of chemical messengers that stimulated growth in the stem. These chemical messengers were hormones. It is not uncommon for parents to wonder whether their child is acting like a normal teenager or behaving differently due to mental illness, drug use, or behavioral difficulties. Normal teenagers are often moody due to hormonal and physical changes that happen during puberty. However, when mental illness is involved, it may be difficult to differentiate normal teenage behavior from the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and other emotional difficulties. Teenagers may be short-tempered and get angry easily, especially when they begin to naturally separate from the family and feel they do not have enough distance or privacy. The natural process of separation begins in early adolescence. This is when parents see that their child begins to be embarrassed by them and spends increasing amounts of time with friends and very little time with the family. You may be worried that your teenager spends hours on end on the computer or locked in his or her room chatting on the phone and gets defensive when asked what he or she is doing or who he or she is talking to. This type of behavior is
When it comes to our careers, the analogy we've been given is a ladder. We're climbing, 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 seeing just how high we can get. But if we want to be a part of organizations that are diverse and inclusive and truly reflect the world that we live in, that's simply not enough. While we climb, we also need to lift. It's no secret that our companies and organizations rarely have leadership teams that represent the communities they serve. That makes them less effective in their work, less innovative, and less profitable too. We need more women steering the ship, more people of color at the helm, more folks with disabilities in charge, more immigrants setting the tone, more queer and trans folks calling the shots. So whether you're a new hire who's a proud member of one or more of these groups, or a longtime leader who is none of the above, each of us has a role to play in making this happen. Success is no longer about our individual ambitions, but about how we build something greater together. My mother introduced me to this concept of lifting while you climb.
With all the legitimate concerns about AIDS and avian flu, and we'll hear about that from the brilliant Dr. Brilliant later today, I want to talk about the other pandemic, which is cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, all of which are completely preventable for at least 95% of people just by changing diet and lifestyle. And what's happening is that there's a globalization of illness occurring. The people are starting to eat like us and live like us and die like us. And in one generation, for example, Asia's gone from having one of the lowest rates of heart disease and obesity and diabetes to one of the highest. And in Africa, cardiovascular disease equals the HIV and AIDS deaths in most countries. So there's a critical window of opportunity we have to make an important difference that can affect the lives of literally millions of people and practice preventive medicine on a global scale. Heart and blood vessel diseases still kill more people, not only in this country, but also worldwide than everything else combined, and yet it's completely preventable for almost everybody.
Where are the robots? We've been told for 40 years already that they're coming soon. Very soon they will be doing everything for us. They'll be cooking, cleaning, buying things, shopping, building, but they aren't here. Meanwhile, we have illegal immigrants doing all the work, but we don't have any robots. So what can we do about that? What can we say? So I want to give a little bit of a different perspective of what we can how we can perhaps look at these things in a little bit of a different way. And this is an X-ray picture of a real beetle and a Swiss watch back from '88. You look at that, and what was true then is certainly true today. We can still make the pieces, we can make the right pieces, we can make the circuitry with the right computational power, but we can't actually put them together to make something that will actually work and be as adaptive as these systems.
So 29 years ago, I had this thermo teacher who talked about absorption and refrigeration. It was one of those things that stuck in my head. It was a lot like the Stirling engine. It was cool, but you didn't know what to do with it. And it was invented in 1858 by this guy, Ferdinand Carré, but he couldn't actually build anything with it because of the tools at the time. This crazy Canadian named Powell Crosley commercialized this thing called the Icy Ball in 1928. And it was a really neat idea, and I'll get to why it didn't work, but here's how it works. There's two spheres, and they're separated in distance. One has a working fluid, water and ammonia, and the other is a condenser. You heat up one side, the hot side. The ammonia evaporates, and it recondenses in the other side. You let it cool to room temperature, and then as the ammonia re-evaporates and combines with the water back on the erstwhile hot side, it creates a powerful cooling effect. So it was a great idea. Didn't work at all. They blew up. Because of using ammonia, you get hugely high pressures if you heated them wrong. They topped 400 psi.
The heyday of the English landscape garden was the 18th century, and it stood for many things. The appreciation of natural beauty, of course, but also the idea of a civilized life, good taste, one's personal philosophy, and one's social status. Gardens also, though it is hard for us to credit, became expressions of their owners' political affiliations. Until the picturesque style emerged as part and parcel of the Romantic movement, gardens had been strictly formal, laid out with mathematical precision following the Italian and French examples. There then came a backlash against this rigid formality, led by, among others, the poet Alexander Pope. Pope and his allies argued for a more natural nature. Lord Burlington was a major figure in the landscape garden movement, and he was famously influenced by his love of the Italian architect Andrea Palladio, along with the picturesque or romanticized landscapes of Italian classical painting. With these in mind, he scattered his gardens and parks with classical Greek and Roman temples and statues. In other words, he wanted to make the garden look like those paintings.
Many cities are actively working on ways to reduce air pollution.
If your journey in inclusion feels easy, you have packed too light.
Most people have cooking fires in the world, whether it's camel dung or wood.